The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian and Mr. Betcher bringing down security.
How's it going?
Not too bad. Well, it might be bad if you were an incident response person who was working with an MSP this weekend. This weekend being the 4th of July, 2021. We're recording this on the 6th, which is the first day after everybody gets back from there. But yeah, it was one of those things. I was sitting at home on Friday, and I was sitting at an Airbnb on Friday, and I saw the Kaseya stuff pop on Twitter, and I was like, oh God, that sucks. It's like those things. It's like, maybe we could just not tell people until, Saturday or, Monday or something. And then we won't have to worry about it until after. But no, the press wants to let it bleed. And it's pretty amazing.
Makes for a long weekend.
Oh yeah. You don't have holidays anymore if you're working IR, I guess. So I'm assuming, Mr. Betcher, you weren't affected by the Kaseya stuff at all.
Thankfully, no.
That's good. Because, not only is it used by MSPs, but some companies actually bring that shit in and manage it themselves, which, it leads to other interesting issues, especially if you're a large organization that uses everything under the sun. Not naming any names.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, I don't want to call you an expert, but you know a little bit about a lot of stuff. A friend of mine, he lives here in the Seattle area. He will not be here for very much longer, but reached out to me because he wrote a book, and I worked with him back in the CrowdStrike days when I was at CrowdStrike, and then I moved on. But I'd like to welcome Dan Borges to the show.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Little bit of business. Miss Berlin is not here this week. She's got she's got family stuff. So, we let her take time with the fam. So she will not be here this week or next week if we make this a two-parter episode. So, so Dan, tell us about yourself. How did you get to where you're at in information security, and what drives you to do what you do?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. I originally started in computer science and programming. And I went to school for computer science and information security. And in school, I got involved in a number of different CTFs and competitions. And then after I got out of school, I got even more involved in red teaming. And in the beginning of red teaming, there was this big catch-22 where it was how do I get my foot in the door, right? I need experience breaking into things, but it's hard to get this experience. Without actually breaking into things, and that's illegal unless you have the job. And I stumbled upon CCDC, or the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. And It's kind of like the, if people aren't aware, it's like the NCAA basketball league for cybersecurity in colleges, right? So it's like this collegiate level cybersecurity competition held every year in the United States. And there's 10 different regions, and then they all go up to this big national competition. And it's a defense-based competition where, the students have to defend these networks from intruders. And the way I got involved in is I got to be one of the intruders and simulate this attacker for these student networks. And it was just a great place to learn. When I first got involved, I was very, new to information security in general. I had just gotten out of school, but all these people are volunteers. So I started learning all these tricks from different, people involved, Alex Levinson or Vis, so all these different people involved in the Western region. And from there, I just got very involved. I've been doing it for years. I run the virtual region now. And I'm part of the core national red team for NCCDC. So it's just been a very long journey of playing these attack and defense competitions after school, with the idea of this was something that I was really interested in school. And I want to perpetuate this and give students more opportunities to play these games and experience these things.
Very cool. Okay. And you finished up obviously with college and landed a job maybe not, doing some threat intelligence and doing some analysis and, checking out how various attackers work. So, you wrote a book, which, I did not realize you had, you'd left your previous company and you were writing a book, and it's out on Packt Publishing. We have a link in our show notes for that. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. So you can go check that out and get the book. I wanted to talk a little bit about Kaseya, because I think that this is a nice segue into the discussion that we're going to have with your book. I didn't cause Kaseya to happen and then have you on to discuss that. It just kind of happened that way. So we got lucky or unlucky, depending on who you're talking to, in regards to this. So this was, I think one of the biggest things was people were saying this was a supply chain attack. And then people were like, no, this is not a supply chain attack. This is not like a SolarWinds, or this is something else. It's kind of like how Target was. And I made that equivalence before we started recording, that they got in through the HVAC vendor, is what I understood for Target. This is, if your company's been attacked through your MSP, it's probably because they used Kaseya, or, they're just using something else. So, we've been made to understand, and there's a link in our notes to a Sophos write-up, that Revel, which is the same organization that attacked the Colonial Pipeline a couple of weeks ago, almost a month ago now, they've been very busy. They've been very busy. And so they are, working to, create mayhem wherever they can. And I was just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And, if there was, what your thoughts was on the attack, and how, what was your feeling on how you think they got into the Kaseya bit? And as we did this on the 6th of July, is still a very much in flux. So things may have changed when you listen to this in a couple of weeks or in a couple of years. So maybe we'll come back to this at some point, but just your thoughts on this, Dan, would be great.
Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure how they classify it, right? Software supply chain, or is this just like MSSP and they have remote administration capabilities into the environment? And then I'm not even like 100% sure of the details of the vulnerability. Like, how did Kaseya get hacked? I heard it was like SQL injection in one of their web applications, perhaps. Right. Yeah. But to me, when you think about like threat modeling, or you think about your organization and you think about how you want to protect it, one of the I call it the principle of humanity. But like, these are computer systems are designed for human use, right? So you have to think about like, who are the administrators of your network and how do they administrate your network, right? It could be Kaseya, it could be Jamf, it could be AD, but whatever those core channels to administrate your network are, those are almost some of your crown jewels, right? Like, those are the reins of your network that you want to protect. Maybe not as much as like your core business, but like very much so. Like those are a high value, high target thing that you need to have security around. So if you're going to outsource that to like a group or somebody else that's going to do it, you really need to have a lot of trust in that group. And I know there's a lot of it doesn't get as much love, but there's a lot of like compliance organizations within security that do that. You know what I mean? They go through these vendor checks and they say like, does this vendor meet certain security requirements, or can we trust this vendor to a certain degree? So I think those are really important jobs that don't get enough attention in these cases. But yeah, it's a matter of trust. Like, who are you trusting to hold the keys to your network?
Yeah. I think what's particularly egregious about these kinds of attacks is that we think that our managed service or managed security providers actually have better security than us because we use them to do our security. But they're just people, and they just, you've pretty much outsourced your security team to watch logs or to watch events that are coming. They're just as fallible as if you'd have, hired a bunch of people and brought them into your own environment and ran that software. Or, maybe, I know Ms. Berlin will be she may not be the first to tell you, but, her company does managed services too. And, stuff happens, and, they have to defend against that, but they also, have to, deal with the ramifications of that. So, Yeah, so it's just interesting. Plus, the amount of access they have means that they're beyond local admin on everything. They're admin in a lot of cases because they have access to all of your machines. Used to be that it was like the Tivolis or the whatever the hell they call Tivoli now. I mean, or file integrity monitoring systems or anything like that. Those are the systems that they would attack because they have access to everything in your environment or whatever's on your management network to get access to your ILOs. So having access from your MSPs is interesting. Mr. Betcher, just a thought: if you had an MSP and you wanted to not repeat what happened with the Kaseya stuff, I'm not saying I wouldn't buy Kaseya, but would you suggest to companies, I don't need to have all the access you think I need? Or is it just easier to give you all that access and then, deal with the ramifications of that? Because this feels like an any rule in a firewall. It's like, oh, I've got full access to all the things everywhere at all times. Is there a way, and this is a thought process or a thought exercise, that you could say, well, I don't need access to everything, just give me access to blah? Or should they have like multi-users or multi-roles? And it's like, well, I'm an MSP, I should, I'm an MSP log user, or I'm the MSP AD user, or I'm, should they have that kind of granularity in their environment?
Yes, of course. It depends on what they do, right? So if it's a MSSP, a security service provider, maybe they only need read-only access. Like all the stuff, all the info is coming into them, and they have least privilege on their end as well. If it's a MSP, it depends on what they need access to. Do they, go in and I don't know, reimage VMs for the the host company? I'm not sure, but yeah, that definitely needs to be segregated. I don't know all of the stuff that this particular IT service provider did for its clients. Certainly we can read up on it, but I did post a link that has some really cool updates in it. In fact, it's got, like 7 p.m. today, which was an hour ago. They posted
Huntress.
Another update.
Yeah, Huntress had a really good timeline of that. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I haven't been through the whole thing yet, but yeah, to answer your question, it all depends on what they've contracted out to do. And yeah, they need to be well aware that they need to segregate all their clients and and make sure that if their keys to the kingdom get attacked, that it'll be very difficult to go after each individual company or customer.
Right. And Dan, I'm gonna, as the resident expert and author, I would let you go ahead and please weigh in on that question as well.
Well, it just got me thinking, right? Like it's almost a step backwards from traditional security, right? Like if you had your AD behind a VPN, right? There's layers of security if you get through to there. And now we're pushing these things to these web applications where a third party manages it on the web, right? So now not only is it easier to access, but like who else has access, right? Like all of their engineers, anybody that works on the data, not just your team, but like X amount of other people in this other company could potentially trigger actions on your stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And then you've got the whole idea of insider threat, is your MSP vetting those things? Is it okay? So I don't work for an MSP. Never have. Well, I did, but it was only for corporate security purposes. But is it possible to create that separation, like Mr. Betcher had mentioned, or where the MSP only works with certain parts of the organization, or they have to have permission to be able to do X or Y. Maybe your MSPs also your IR people, so they would have to have the alacrity to be able to make those changes. Or we see something in the logs, give us access because now it's incident response. I mean, what does that make the relationship more complicated, or is it something that MSPs should say, hey, you shouldn't be giving us this access unless we absolutely need it, and we don't absolutely need it right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Mr. Betcher like hit the nail on the head. Like sometimes if you can give them, let's say, only read-only data, that's what you want to do, is you want to limit their access as much as possible. You don't want to give them the keys to your kingdom. But then you're right. Like, what if that comes with incident response capabilities? What if they can trigger actions on the host? And in those situations, I think like my mind jumps right to the non-repudiation, right? Like have logs, and if something goes wrong, but even then, that doesn't save you from them doing things that go wrong, right? Like you need the controls and the you would almost need like a break glass account where if they want to do something that modifies integrity, they have to get like permission or something.
And this is a complicated attack. I mean, it's not like they guessed passwords on a website or something. It's there's a lot to this attack, a lot. They probably completely owned, Kaseya and is it Kaseya?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
And then from there they took a foothold there and got access to a bunch of customers of theirs. I guess who in turn had their own customers. So there's multiple layers to this attack, and I'm certain it's been going on for quite some time.
Right. And that was one thing, because earlier today on the 6th of July there was a story, and I don't know if they're connected, but it was also dropped that the RNC, the Republican National Committee, had also been hacked today as well. And this is right on the heels of these things. And I'm not trying, causality and whatever the thing they called it, whatever they call it. But, it just led me, the first thing I thought of when I heard the RNC being hacked was, okay, this is fallout from Kaseya, or this is fallout from the MSP. We could see additional issues coming down the line. I mean, there's stories saying that 1,500 companies could be involved because they all use MSPs that also use Kaseya. Right now, if you're an MSP that doesn't use Kaseya, you're doing well. But there's also companies that actually bring Kaseya in-house and is not using an MSP, and they're managing it themselves, which is a whole other ball of issues. So, there's a lot of great write-ups about these various things. And I mean, we talked about some of this last week, Mr. Betcher. You were talking about, malicious code injected into DLLs, matching targeted, executables and being placed in the same folder as the executable. So it is found before legitimate copy, which is exactly what you were talking about with DLL injections last week with, that person's website. Who's the person we were talking about, Mr. Betcher, with the DLL stuff?
We'll fix it in post.
Well, okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, there was like 8 different ways of doing DLL injection. This is just one of those malicious codes put into a library and put right next to the target executable. So it looks there first and loads it. So, so that's, that's very classic. And then once the DLL is loaded into memory, the malware deletes it from the disk. So it's not file, it's malware, like Mr. Betcher is fond of saying. So it actually has a file that has to be injected. So, all right. So this is a lovely set. Go ahead, Dan. Dan.
Oh, I wanted to say with the Kaseya thing, like, I think they're demanding something like, I don't know, like 70 million in ransom, like as a collected price. But, to me, like, I feel like a lot of people forget this, right? Like there's no default security. Security is not by default. And even if there's no vulnerabilities, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's not going to trick you and take your stuff, right? Like there's social engineering and lots of ways to hack people through those ways. So in my mind, it's all about what is the value of the stuff you're protecting, right? If you have 100 downstream companies and they all have tons of value and tons of downstream companies, you need to like significantly invest to protect that, right? Like that's a massive value you're trying to protect. And like like Brian said, like Betcher said, what's going to happen is these attackers are going to invest that money for that big payoff. They're going to put the time in to worm their way in and do this long campaign. And you might say like, wow, that's really complicated. Like they've clearly planned this out, but the payoff's there. The payday is there for them. And they see that. And that's why it's worth the work for them.
Right. Yep. So Mr. Betcher, it's hexacorn.
Oh yeah. Hexacorn,
the DLL injection stuff. So, so anyway, he's pretty awesome. Yeah. Or they are pretty awesome. I don't know if hexacorn is
there's 8 of them.
For that.
No,
there's 8 of them, right? So this is a great segue into Dan's book, like we said, with Packt Publishing. So what made you want to write the book? Everybody, I see everybody who's done it. Miss Berlin, of course, has done one. She worked on one, and she's working on another. I don't know what drives people to be able to fill up a book with knowledge. I don't have the patience for it. I can't. I don't write good, so I don't speak well either.
Well, definitely the hardest part about writing a book is actually writing it. Nobody ever tells you that, but sitting down and writing all those words is very difficult.
Right.
But yeah, what really triggered it was a lot of these CCDC competition type stuff. Like I've been doing this for years, and I've just been sitting there, in a rootkit watching a keylog of some, student that has no idea what's going on, right? Like they're just like, how are you in my machine? What is happening? What black magic is this, right? And I just wanted to like illuminate that just for a moment for these students coming into this competition, being like, we could be in a process, like we could be running in a different process. There's this thing, process injection, right? We could be running a remote thread somewhere that they don't see. And the very act of doing that is almost suspicious, right? Like the idea of remote thread creation. And once you start to like pick up on these concepts and you understand, these, it's like thinking like an attacker. Once you understand how the attacker works, you can start to like see them and detect them. And I felt like those lessons weren't there. Every year we had new students coming in, we were beating them over the head with these crazy advanced techniques, and they would leave like, what just happened to me? And to me, we needed that full circle of learning, right? We needed this feedback of here's what we're doing. Here's how you can catch us. Why don't you try this next time?
Here's what's possible.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what could even happen on a system, right? Like your logs are missing. Why are your logs missing, right? Like, are we editing them? Like, what's going on here?
Right. So one of the things when I was reading through the GitHub, if you don't want to, well, I think you should buy the book, but in the event you can't buy the book or whatever reason, there's a lot of good information on Dan's GitHub, which is there's a link in the show notes, talking about kind of a synopsis of the chapters, not all the entire book, but a good synopsis. And I was looking through some of these things, and you have various principles, and I don't know where you got the principles from. And I definitely want to ask that question, because I find some of these quite interesting, like the principle of economy. And it says this principle states both offensive and defensive teams have limited budgets and can only invest in so many strategies for their operations. I definitely see that on the defensive side, because you're only given so much budget from the bean counters in finance or from your CIO or whatever. Right now, the offensive side's looking about $70 million richer right now, and is still pulling money there. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm seeing the limited budget for the offensive side. I do understand so many strategies because they have a playbook, they run what works and whatever. I was just trying to get an idea of how you see the principles of economy in something like the Kaseya outbreak, where obviously the offensive people are kicking ass, or is this the budget before they actually do their thing, which is very limited, and then that's the reward, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll take the first part of the question, right? Like, where did I get these principles from? So I'd say like a grip of these principles I have borrowed from either other industries or other professionals in the industry. So the first, humanity and economy, come from Matthew Monet and his book Network Attacks, which is a fantastic book. If you ever get a chance to read that, I have a copy in the other room. But yeah, Matthew Monet, Network Attacks, fantastic book. And in that, he lays out a bunch of different principles. Some of those are the principles of humanity. Computer systems are designed for human use. They have human interfaces. You can trick humans. And some of those are the principles of economy, right? Which is like all of us have these finite budgets and these limits. And one of the biggest limitations within an economy is actually expertise, right? The economy of your team. Like, what are you putting together? And like, you can only have, I guess you could have a huge team, but like most people can only have so many people on a team because you can pay them so much.
Great point.
I think where the bad guys, like the actual the actors, kind of feel the pinch of the economy is the people, right? Like, how many people out there are smart enough to do these things, write these tools, and then are also like, morally corrupt enough to be like okay with doing this, right? Like ransomwaring a hospital or something crazy, right? And I think when you combine that, they actually have a very small pool of people to pull from that have developed the expertise and are willing to like risk that much.
Okay. That makes sense. Plus, you have to think along the lines of the more people you have, the more likely your OPSEC is going to fail, and you're all going to get picked up or have a warhead on a forehead somewhere, depending on where you're located in the world. So,
and that's
so there is an economy of time as well. They're limited in time. You do have a principle of time, right?
The
so
principle
how are
of
those
time
different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I thought so much about putting those together because it's exactly like you said, like time is a resource, right? Time is something you spend when you want to set up systems. But in computer science, there's this weird, like, I don't know what it is. It's like a trade-off, right? Where you can program something and you spend a lot of upfront time to develop this thing that then happens lightning quick, right? And that's what I try to get down to with the principle of time is that if you automate these tools, and it's a principle that pulls from the other principles like planning, right? Like you can start with planning, but then if you automate these tools and you can like achieve this very fast action time, you just overwhelm the opponent. Like they can't react. Like if you've scripted everything out. And I think that kind of gets to Dimitri's 1:10:60 time, right? Like you have these actors with these extremely fast breakout times. Like on the CCDC red team, we had it down to like 1 or 2 minutes a few years ago. This last year was 7 minutes. But that's the time from us compromising our first box to running our automated tools, gathering credentials, and then moving to the second machine. And in my book, in the last chapter, I talk about like the spread of the attacker. When do you want to respond? And that all kind of happens on this timeline, right? Like how many systems does the attacker have? Like with Kaseya, like have they gotten their actions on their goals? Have they ransomwared everything yet? You know what I mean? And then in that case, you don't want to like just smash the quarantine button and freak out. You want to like plan your response. So the principle of time is really that for me. It's measuring your time and then automating things so that you can react faster than other people, you know, when you have to.
And I can definitely hear that coming from the offensive side, because you want to automate as much as you can because you want to cut down on the amount of time you're spending, typing things, that makes me answer if they could automate a lot of these attacks. Does that mean that most MSPs set up Kaseya in the same way, and they were aware of that, and that made it easier for them to compromise as many as they did?
I'm not 100% sure.
I know that's I apologize. That's conjecture. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I was thinking, if attackers have to do reconnaissance, they have to know who's doing what and using what. So at some point, MSSPs have slipped up and said, "Yeah, we use Kaseya," or they talk to the salespeople. I want to take and use your MSP, and oh yes, we use Kaseya. Buy our stuff. Oh yes, I will use that. And sorry, I apologize to all my Russian friends out there. But so it's like they've done their homework. They've done the reconnaissance. They assume that all of the Kaseyas are being used in these MSSPs in a very similar manner, I would imagine, or I doubt that they're very much sitting there going, okay, C:\/ typey. They're Pythoning, scripting this up, or using bash scripts or whatever to automate this whole playbook to make it easier. So your principle of time, I would definitely say, works in the sameness of all the environments if they've sent Kaseya out in the same way. I could be wrong, but
yeah. And it's I want to get back just really quickly to the targeting, because I thought you brought up a great point earlier, which is like sometimes these organizations, Kaseya is the means to the end, right? They're using Kaseya to get into their organization, and that's what like the targeting is. They're like, man, I really want that guy. You know what I mean? How do I get there? And then they work it backwards. But then other times it's just like crimes of opportunity, right? Like you get in, they have 70 instances, and then you've ransomwared the one, and you already have it scripted out, right? So then you just throw it in a for loop and iterate on the customers, and then the next thing you know, you've ransomwared them all, and let's go.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So let's see.
In this attack, I think they had plenty of time to plan their actual attack. They probably were in the environment for many weeks and were low and slow. and planned ahead of time for that particular weekend.
Right.
I mean, what are the odds that they actually broke in just a day or two before 4th of July weekend and just decided to attack right at that point? No, I think it's more likely that they waited and planned it and were not discovered until it was too late.
Right.
And that I would say is almost the flip side of the principle of timing, right? Which is the low and slow attacks. Like there's another aspect of timing. It's not always like fast, ransomware the whole environment. Like for the CCDC team, our game plan is always like, normally it's like day one, we get in, we persist and we hide and we just wait until day 2. And our whole goal is to get caught in the backup. So like we want them to back up our malware. So that way day 2, if they restore, we're still there. So like, yeah, like sometimes different strategies like have different timings. You know what I mean? Like, are you trying to spy on somebody for a certain amount of time? But I think at least with the principle of time, the one thing I try to capture is like all things are finite, right? Like you're not going to stay in an environment forever. There's going to be a certain time when you want to end an operation and you want to kind of plan that ending out. And then another thing, this is like just a weird observation, but like bit rot and decay, right? Like one of the things with the principle of time is everything requires upkeep. If you just have these systems and you never update them or you don't invest security into them, they're going to get weaker over time and they're just going to degrade and kind of like deteriorate.
I kind of see that as like a dip, maybe like a roller coaster. You start up here and like everything's new and it's all patched and everything, and then the security goes down because you're not patching anything. But then you find those Windows 2000 boxes, or you find that Windows 2.4 kernel that doesn't need to be patched because the 2.4 kernel is actually older than when the vulnerability was actually introduced. So you're actually safer with the older kernel.
older than the attackers themselves.
Right.
There's been a number of Solaris boxes where I've been like, nope, not for me. Somebody else can take that one.
Yeah, or Windows NT, and they're like, we don't have anything in our arsenal for that. They purged all the Windows NT.
When was the last time
stuff.
an OS2 warp machine was hacked?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they like to keep that stuff under wraps somewhat, but that's pretty funny. Yeah. So I have seen that actually, where we went to patch something. And we're like, oh, it's not vulnerable. It's running a kernel version that it was before the vulnerability was introduced. So yay.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.